feels like Americans were the first voice. And then everywhere else was like, all right, we gotta do something different. Because the way that we talk is so plain, it's so vanilla, it's so unaffected. So it feels like every other country had to pick one by one at a time, what their accent was gonna be. Russia was first, and they were like, okay, hello, you mother Russia will talk like this. It will be bleak with despair, everything will sound like it has no hope. And then it was Ireland's turn, and they're like, all right, I guess we'll just fucking go the other way with it. Everybody starts faking like this, just start sounding like you're being tickled at all times. I don't know what to sound like. We'll just start like you're being tickled at all times. And then, obviously, of course, Scandinavia was last. And they're like, what the fuck? This is bullshit. There's no other voices to choose from. Now we have to sound like we're riding the train at all times. We'll have to with this shitty voice. Every single show that I've ever done that joke on, a guy walks up to me. We don't sound anything alike.
Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Trey Farkas, and on today's bonus episode, something a little different. In part one of a two-part conversation, I'm joined by the man whose voice you just heard, New York City comedian Nick Callas, who I had the pleasure of seeing at Portsmouth's Music Hall Lounge last month. We were supposed to do this interview before his performance, but Friday Boston traffic had other plans for us. But luckily, we caught up a few days later to talk about his performance on the Seacoast, his impressions of the area, how he became a professional comedian, what it's like navigating the tough political waters in comedy these days, and also the behind-the-scenes making of his first comedy special, Wolf Pup, which premieres on June 27th. Now, a quick programming note. This is a launch week bonus episode of Seacoast Stories, making it slightly different than the standard episodes you'll come to expect every Monday morning. In addition to those Monday episodes, I'll publish bonus episodes on the occasional Thursdays, and these shows will have a noticeably different feel than the Monday episodes. They might be more stripped down conversations, perhaps it'll be a solo episode, or it could be a podcast that I've made in reaction to a breaking news event from the day before. As we get going here, you'll see what I mean. So thank you for checking out Seacoast Stories, and if you've enjoyed the first few episodes of the show, it would mean everything to me if you shared the show with the Seacoaster in your life, because I believe it will help bring us all closer together, which is exactly what we need more of in this world. So thank you in advance. And without further ado, here's part one of my conversation with New York City rapper, actor, and comedian Nick Callas.
A couple weeks ago was my second time in Portsmouth. Around the same time last year, I played the Music Hall Lounge, and that was my first time, and I immediately fell in love. Personally, I love like little beachy sort of coastal towns, and so there's something very Americana and very charming about Portsmouth specifically, especially when the weather's nice. You walk down the street and there's all these little like shops and restaurants and ice cream places and statues of some guy who was important to America and a flagpole and just it just feels like you're in a Disney Channel movie. And so I love it aesthetically to begin with. And then with the show that we did, I think we did two shows the first time we came to Portsmouth, myself and my openers, Kevin McGloin and Luke Burke. And we had a blast. Both shows were great. The people were so lovely and so fun, and you never know what you're going to get when you leave like a big city where comedy is just a daily, a nightly thing. You never know what you're going to get politically. You never know what you're going to get in terms of how does the lifestyle and age of these people reflect in their sensibilities and sense of humor. And we just felt like everybody was so cool and fun and excited to see stand-up because I mean, I don't know too specifically, but I certainly got the impression that there isn't a ton of it in Portsmouth. And so you could really feel that the people felt like the show was a cool, fun, special thing to do. And also, sometimes that means that people just show up for whatever the comedy is. They don't care. They're just excited to see it. But in our experience, people had kind of done some research. A lot of them knew who I was, had seen something online or something that the the Music Hall Lounge had put up and were interested. And it makes for a better show because I have to do less work to little subtle things to sort of establish this is who I am. Here's my lens. This is what my sense of humor is. People were just kind of like, we got this guy. We're excited to see him. And then, you know, the shows are great. And then afterwards, we just like had our little vacation, you know, like we tooled around and we went to that restaurant Surf.
Nice.
Which is amazing. I've never had sushi so good made by a white guy.
Hard to get a table there, so I don't know who you had to tip off.
Hard. I think we just stood outside for a while. Yeah, we went on a friend's boat, a friend that we made through the show, which maybe we'll talk about as a recurring thing. When I go to Portsmouth, I go on stage and I immediately ask the crowd who has a boat, and if I do well enough and we're friends, I'm going on it. But yeah, man, I love it. I love it so much.
So how does a place like Portsmouth, and you also performed in Portland, Maine a few weeks ago, and you were also performing in Auburn, Maine in a few weeks. Now, these are a little bit off the beaten path in terms of the rest of your tour. New York City, Austin, Chicago, these very big, well-known cities where comedy's a hub. So how do you end up at places on the Seacoast?
It's a good question, man. I think Buddy had put me on to the Music Hall Lounge, which definitely opened me up to like, oh, well, what other cool little small towns are there that have great venues? Because now that comedy's always been huge, but like comedy's ubiquitous now. Stand-up is ubiquitous now, right? So there's all these towns that have a great little town with like young and old people alike who are excited to see more stand-up and people who know how to make a cool venue. So you have all these cool rooms opening up in smaller markets. And because it's a smaller market, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be less people to go. Sometimes it just means there's a more dedicated, more niche audience for it. So a couple friends have put me on to a couple places like Portsmouth. And after doing the Music Hall Lounge, I was like, oh, this is where it's at. This is great. And so then I kind of just did a little more investigation, talked to a few more buddies. So I was born and raised in Jersey. And so like, it's far, it's a drive 4 or 5 hours to some of these spots, but it's easy. You know, you just go north and you're there. And again, like it gets to be by the water and it's a fun weekend. So like, I'm all about it.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you enjoyed yourself. Now, I work in the entertainment industry too, in podcasting, and the long prevailing notion, which I'm sure has been in comedy as well, is you need to be in New York City, you need to be in Los Angeles if you really want to make something of yourself. But as we've seen over the past few years with the internet, with the pandemic kind of accelerating things, not necessarily the case anymore, at least in podcasting. You can be anywhere and you can still reach anyone that you want and make a decent living. So I'm wondering, for comedy, could you ever see yourself living in a place like a Portsmouth or a Portland and being just as successful as you are in New York City?
It's a good question. I don't know how things will continue to change by the time I'm 40, 50, 60. But I predict proximity to a big city will only matter less and less for the reasons you just mentioned, right? I mean, there are people in the last decade more famous than Brad Pitt was through TikTok, right? And they live anywhere and everywhere. I think the thing about stand-up is that to get good, you got to get up a lot. And to get up a lot, you got to live somewhere where there are plenty of stages. So in the early part of your career, you need to be doing all these open mics and all these independent shows and all these comedy club shows. And I mean, I could list like 15 stand-up comedy clubs within, 15 miles of each other right now in New York City. I just don't know that there's that big a scale anywhere else. And so I think to actually develop the skill of getting good, you probably need to be in a big market. And I don't know that that'll ever change. But I think as far as developing a fan base, you could do one set at your buddy's garage show, post it on YouTube, and have 200,000 followers in a week. Like, visibility has changed. And I think sometimes it seems like in ways that actually hurt like the long-term growth and craft of an artist. But ultimately, I don't know that that matters from a consumer side. Like, you will like or dislike whatever you find yourself seeing based on its merits in a vacuum. So I think stand-up is always going to be best where there's more of it. Because it's just, the skill is just a war of attrition. You just have to do it so much. And I don't know that one room, 2 rooms could ever provide you enough stage time to get there.
Speaking to the early days of your career, now you're a very young guy, so you're still in the early stages of your career. But in the earliest stages of your career, like you said, you have to get on stage a lot, and you probably have to get on stages where there's few people in the audience. So I'm wondering, what is it about you that has allowed you to push past that stage? Because I imagine that stage is where you weed out the people who are not meant for this.
It's a good question. What is it about me? This is a stab in the dark. I think that I am both eager not to be embarrassed or to impress or to change my own and other people's perception of myself. And also, I can't be embarrassed. I don't really care. So it's this sort of two-pronged thing of like, as a kid, I would do super goofy stuff. I would embarrass myself because, I don't know, it felt like there was value in sort of breaking the fourth wall of the performance of life that everybody was doing and breaking expectations and just creating a moment. I always liked, like, let me shake it up, like create a moment. And I don't care if that makes me look like an idiot, because the value is in people going, oh, or, you know, and just having a reaction and laughing. I felt that way with sort of everything, like whether, because I used to draw, and I would draw sort of violent, provocative comic book imagery, and I could see that have a reaction, and then making the inappropriate joke or saying the thing you're not supposed to say, that I could feel that there was a value in that. And also I don't know that I care where it comes from because of that. Because I go, well, if I'm giving you a laugh, I'll be rewarded for that in ways that maybe I or you won't even know. There'll be this slow accumulation of, maybe I thought it was appreciation of me by way of being a guy who makes moments. And then at the same time, I'm so concerned with creating a perception of myself that I like, that I would be fine embarrassing myself. I used to like try to do a backflip off a garbage can in the center of town, land on my face and get hurt just because I knew that like it was going to be a moment for people. A big staple of my early humor was hurting myself.
Well, I could tell that you're comfortable with that because you got on stage in some positions where I was like, he's in kind of some danger here. I mean, you perched yourself like a cat on a stool for a good 3 minutes. Thought you could fall off that thing at any moment.
Yeah, that is part of it for me. I like to feel like what I'm doing for people is something that they're not otherwise going to encounter, both because I want to be unique as a performer, and then also because I want, if people pay $25 for a ticket, I want them to leave saying, well, that was worth the price of admission because it was more than a guy standing stationary in front of a microphone saying silly sentences. I want them to feel like they had an experience that is unique to that night and also unique to comedy. And then also I feel like I have to risk something. Doing a good stand-up performance is an extremely difficult thing, but it's an extremely difficult thing to do well, but it's not an extremely difficult thing to do. You just go up and you say sentences. And I feel the same way about acting. I feel the same way about rap music. I like fast rap. I like things that have a technical difficulty to them. And I think that when I am doing physical comedy and there is kind of an element of danger, I can feel the risk and the reward, and that really activates the performer in me.
I am dying to know, because you're the first comedian actually that I've ever spoken to. So this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. So forgive me if these are stupid questions. But what is your process like for figuring out your material? Is it, I'm sure every comedian is different, but is it just thoughts come to you in the shower? You sit for 2 hours and write? What do you do?
It's definitely a lot of thoughts come to me in the shower type thing. Sometimes I'll find myself just sort of thinking conceptually about stuff, maybe on a walk, maybe whenever my head is in a kind of creative space and I'm open to when I'm actively thinking about something I might want to make. Every once in a while, not nearly as often as I would like to, but I think that's also because I've probably developed a skill set that maybe protects me from having to be more diligent about writing. I will have ideas pretty loosely and just take them right to stage and try to develop the piece in the room with the audience, because I think there's a lot of reasons for it. When the crowd is there and they're hearing what you're saying and you don't know what you're going to say, there's a pressure that's put on you to develop this thing to an audience-worthy status instantly. I think for some comedians, their strength is in the preparation. And I think for guys like myself, that immediate pressure can evoke something really genuine. That for me is where I think a lot of my best stuff comes. When my back is up against the wall and I have to sort of defend myself with comedy, I do really well. It evokes, I think, what's best about me. It evokes spontaneity, and that's where I feel sharp. That's where I feel funny. When I'm unprepared, because there's not enough time to sit and, be paralyzed by analyzing all the different routes I could take. I think who I am, like intrinsically, is what my comedic voice is. There isn't a lot of contrivance off stage to create the comedian that will then deliver the jokes that I came up with separately. It's like me is me up there, and the more I can cut out the middleman of this very thinky, brainy creative, I get to the root and I get to the good stuff faster. There's a responsible way to do it, which is to still be aware of what the aim is, still have, performative beats in mind, and just kind of be responsible as opposed to lazy about, okay, I'm prepared to be unprepared as opposed to I'm genuinely unprepared. I don't know. And I think it's like hibachi grill. Like, I think it's exciting to the audience that they're aware and still maybe not convinced that this is happening in real time live for them, because then you create it together and then it's special for both people. You'll see a million stand-up shows where there's a comic on stage and you can tell that he has a sort of air of not arrogance, but a confidence in that everything that he says is, he knows what's coming next. And that's cool. And it gives the audience trust. But when neither of them have it, and we're just on this crashing plane together, there's a really palpable energy in the room, which is like, nobody knows where this can go. And as long as this guy's funny, we're on board. And I think that's the place that I like to start at, because I get to enjoy the process more, because I get to be surprised by the truth of how I feel. Sometimes I learn how I feel about something on stage, which is really exciting.
Wow. It's fascinating that you point this out, because that was probably my biggest takeaway, or the thing that I was most interested in watching you perform was not the comedy itself, but it was your ability to adapt on the fly, to read the room. That's something I hadn't really considered, is how do you, on the fly, in real time, make the calculations, oh, this worked in Portland, but this isn't going to work in Portsmouth, and I need to reroute it or just move on to the next thing.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. Because that's something that's important to me to do well. I think it's self-trust. I think I've been doing this long enough, and I've subjected myself to different performance environments, be it acting in something, be it doing stand-up in a theater versus doing stand-up in a bar, you accumulate all these different experiences that your body does memorize. And if you committed in each one, you start to remember how you can be in those moments where you're not prepared and survive it and thrive in it. So for me, especially doing big physical act out comedy in situations where maybe it was two people from Scandinavia at a bar at 2 a.m. and still doing a handstand or whatever it is, you learn that, okay, committing will pay off. And actually, not even in terms of everybody's going to laugh. It's hard to tell the difference between 2 people and 0 people laughing. But what pays off is the feeling you have because you did it. You remember that, oh, I felt good about my choice in that moment to double down or to lean into the angle of the bit. When it was over, I was proud or excited about that I went that route. And then you do that in a theater with 2,500 people and you feel proud about that too. And then you do it in a scene where, the camera op and the boom operator are not really impressed with your comedy, but it'll land in the edit later. And so you just accumulate all these experiences of betting on yourself and just privately working for that. When you see it later, you're excited about what you did. And then those things do come and carry with you. So I think in short, I just trust myself that that it's really for me, that I'm the first and last audience member. I'm the first one to see it come out of my mouth, and I'm the last one who's going to watch it back. And so I go, well, I know what I like about Nick Callas and his comedy, so let me satisfy that. And then I think everybody in between will at least be able to acknowledge the merits of what I was trying. And then as far as like actually being able to do it well on the fly, I think that comes from not shying away from that it's live and that it's present. Because if I try a joke and it doesn't work, 9 out of 10 comics are going to find some crafty way of getting to the next thought as quickly as possible, and kind of omitting the bomb from the experience. How do I gaslight this crowd into thinking
right.
that wasn't even a joke, actually? That was just a sentence, and now I'm talking about this. So for me, it's like, well, everybody expects me to be like, oh, well, that one didn't work if something didn't work. And then I make them participate in my shame, which is why it bombed, because I'm telling them it did. So I refuse to do it. I go, well, then that moment where now you guys have to take pity on me and I have to transition to bananas really quick or whatever, I just go, well, then let's live in that too. Because that's funny. It doesn't matter what the jokes are. I could come up and I could do an hour of material about my grandmother and about dating and about so-and-so. Or I could come up and I could eat a cheeseburger if in a funny way, and that'll be worth it to you if it's funny. Or I could jump on a pogo. You could do anything in stand-up. It's the most shackleless art form. And so I try to base everything that I'm doing and everything that I choose to talk about content-wise with this sort of underlying ideology that actually what I'm saying doesn't matter. And that what does matter is the experience of hearing it. So if I tell a joke and it doesn't come off the way I want to, but then this guy's face did that while I was doing it, then that's now in this joke. The whole thing is informed by the context it's happening in.
I was in New York City a few weekends ago, and I just kept laughing out loud to myself as I was seeing firsthand in the city what you were talking about in one of your bits, which was about, hey, imagine the conversation at your home with your dog as you're trying to lure them into your purse to go walk around in the city. I had that happen many times this past weekend, and I thought, oh, wow, he's so right.
That's a fun one for me because I hadn't ever, in Portsmouth was the first time I did that joke.
Oh, wow.
you could ask my girlfriend. Is like, we talk about, first of all, we talk about cats and dogs every second of the day. But that's a joke that I've had some of the other pieces around for a number of months. And I think we were laying up the other night and we started talking about that, and it dawned on me like how insane it is to turn a living creature into just like a part of your outfit.
It was very funny. I very much enjoyed that part of it. Now, you also did a good job navigating kind of the political waters, which I'm curious about. Politics have always been the low-hanging fruit in comedy, I imagine, and especially right now because a lot of things that have happened over the past few years are just, look like it's out of a reality show. So I'm just curious, as a comedian going out through the country, how do you navigate the political comedic waters?
I think you just try and understand that politics, like as a word, refers to policies. And obviously people are going to have different feelings about policies, but it's so much deeper than that. It's so much more personal than that. Politics is ideological. It's moral for people. And also, I'm a comedian. So what I have is perhaps disrespectful, if not just apathetic objectivity towards most things. My feelings about anything are through the lens of art and experience and craft and performance. I look at politics to go, well, what's happening here that's interesting that I can kind of report on? Most people don't care to think about anything in their life other than how does it affect me? How does it affect my family? So politics is deeply personal. So I say that to say that if I go to make a joke about one politician or another and people don't like that or people are offended, yeah, for sure. That's fine. That makes so much sense. I won't begrudge a crowd for not agreeing with the perspective of a joke. I just always try to approach it as, hopefully this is objective enough and so funny that wherever you lie on the political spectrum doesn't change your ability to enjoy this. As far as going state to state, you do have a perception. You do go, oh, well, I'm in South Florida right now, so I bet that they feel this way. Or, oh, I'm in, Williamsburg, New York City, and I bet that they feel this way. And I think that there's value in that, but I think any preconceived notion that you go on stage with, if it's everybody in this crowd's favorite color is blue, that'll hurt your performance. Because now you're trying to do something, you're trying to hit an invisible mark, and you can't, even if you did know, even if you went to, say, like a Republican or Democratic national convention and they hired you to do 20 minutes of stand-up, you know what they're going to like, but it doesn't mean that the jokes are going to work. You know what they might agree with, but people agreeing and people laughing are not the same. People might laugh because they agree, but they're not going to agree because they laugh. You know what I mean? You could get them to co-sign the opinion in your joke, but if the strength of your joke is how smart your opinion is, that's not comedy anymore. So I just try to not think about any of that to answer your question. I just try to go, well, if this is funny, that's enough.
Comedy has always been kind of the playground where we can just all collectively laugh at ourselves, and nothing was really off limits because everyone just kind of realized, hey, we are in this space for this amount of time. We can attack everything and laugh at it, and it doesn't have to mean anything. So I'm just wondering now, because I've heard that there is a shift now around actually, maybe you shouldn't say that, or maybe you should just stray away from that. I'm wondering how you approach this.
I think so. I've seen it, I've felt it, but I don't know that I don't think comedy fans or comedy audience members are more sensitive or more aligned one way or the other. And this is going to sound obvious, but I think it's just people now are living in a heightened sense of other people's feelings. And so you go to a show and you talk about Trump or you talk about Biden. There are these like sides now. There are these lines drawn. I think my girlfriend was saying the other day that it's not people aren't Republican or Democrat anymore. They're conservative or liberal. And that's more ideological and it's more meaningful to them because it's more personal to them. And so I think the audience is more aware of how other people might be feeling. And so that changes their experience of the show because you used to go to a show and your concern with other people laughing was, I like that one. Are they laughing? Oh, you like that one too? That makes me like it more. And now it's, well, I like that one. But did they like that one? Oh, they hate that one? Now I like that one more. Or now I don't. Or, you know what I mean? It's just they're concerned with each other. And then also they're concerned with me. What does it mean if I affirm that perspective by laughing at that joke? What does it change about me and who I think I am? And I think it's because of how much more all of this seems to matter. You used to be able to have your political opinions, and that was private. And now you either have to be private about them, or you have to be public about them, and you have to be a pioneer, and you have to be a warrior for the There's no just it kind of doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
It matters. You have to either be hiding how you feel out of fear that you'll be otherized, or you have to be willing to otherize other people. And so that totally has an effect in a comedy club.
Yeah. Wow. That's really good insight and a brilliant line from your girlfriend as well. I think she's right on the money there.
She's much smarter than me.
You've done well. You asked out one of the women at the show, so I was wondering if you had any updates on that. But I guess.
Oh, did I? What did I do?
You asked a girl in the crowd, how many cats in the house and how many boyfriends. I was pulling for you there, but it seems like you were taking men.
No, we got enough cats, and it's one.
So the new special, Wolf Pup, premieres June 27th, your first one. I imagine this is just something that all comedians have on the bucket list, something that they want to do. So I'm curious, how did this process go about, and did it live up to the expectations that you had for it?
Yeah, it did. And I think in a lot of ways, it's the most accurate experience that one could have of producing a first stand-up special, because I did it quite independently. I mean, it was produced by 800 Pound Gorilla Media, which is amazing, and they make every stand-up special now, and they distribute them now. But I didn't have an HBO or a Netflix or a Comedy Central come in and do the work. Everything that you see in the special, everything was decided and designed by me. And so, I mean, I edited the special, I collaborated in coloring and mixing and doing everything for the special and marketing, so all of that. And so I know really what the thing is. Nobody said, hey, come do your set. We'll film it. We'll handle it from there. All you got to do is show up and do it. I don't think I would really be capable of that anyway, because the material, the performance, that's also personal to me. How it's received by people is important and personal to me. And I think maybe there would be strength in having less creative control for me. I should experiment with that. But for this one, because it was, it's the first album thing, right? Where a band has 10 years to make their first album and then 8 months to make their second. I had 13 years to make this special. It's mostly material that I was doing the year that I was touring to prepare to shoot. So it's 70% stuff from the 8 months prior to shooting it, and then another 30% stuff that I'd been doing 5 years before, and in some cases even 8 years before or 2 years before. So it is a culmination of a lot of different things. But as far as it being my first thing and the sort of debut of me to a broader audience, I feel super excited about it, because so much of what's important for an audience to know about me and the way I want to be received is baked into this thing. There's 10 things about me that if you watch the special, you'll know, and you'll go, okay, I don't know everything, but I kind of get this guy. So I feel that I did a good job in representing myself. And that was the first scariest thing, is going like, well, what jokes do I choose? And what do I wear? And if I didn't know who Nick Callas was and I saw this, what would I think of him? And that stuff is important to consider. And then at some point you just have to let go and just be yourself.
So as this thing gets rolled out over the next few weeks, what will you consider a success for this special?
That's a hard question to answer. I think I have like invisible watermarks and ideas of the amount of views that I would like and the amount of downloads that I would like and all that kind of stuff. But all I can do is put the word out as much as possible and then see what happens. In a less obvious sense, because what I'd like to say is I'd like to get 10 million views and I'd like to get 100,000 downloads, and I would love all of that, and I'll try for all of that. What'll make it a successful special is influenced by my efforts, but ultimately, like, it's a piece of art that some amount of people will super connect to. I don't know what that amount is. What'll make it successful for me is if the reaction that people have to it is the music I was writing to in my head when I came up with it. Because when you come up with jokes or anything really, you are creating it to this imaginary crowd in your head that's loving it. When you write a joke or when an artist writes a song, they're not going, yeah, and then they're going to hate that, and then they're going to think this part sucks. You're imagining it killing. And so I think if it's received the way that I imagined it would be when I was making it, that'll be really validating to both the material and also the crafting of it. So I want people to love it. I want people to love it, in short. And I also want people to say, well, this is you. This really feels like you, and this really feels like I know you. And I felt that way watching it. I've seen it 100,000 times at this point. And I felt like, okay, I did get a lot of me in there, in ways that are a little more subtle and incisive than just jokes about me. There's other things that make something unique. And I don't think there's another special like it. There's some things specifically as far as the form, editing and things like that are different that I put in there. Some things like animation and things like that. And then also me. I think the me that I put on screen I don't feel that the weight of influence that every comic deals with starting out, I don't see that in ways beyond homage anymore. And I think that'll be refreshing to comedy fans.
That's Nick Callas, everyone. His new comedy special, Wolf Pup, premieres June 27th on 800 Pound Gorilla's YouTube channel. I've placed the link in the show notes in case you are interested. Coming up tomorrow on Seacoast Stories, part 2 of this bonus episode with Nick Callas, where we'll have a deeper conversation about a topic that hits very close to home for both of us, and maybe for you too. Here's a taste of what to expect.
It's a really, really weird feeling. I wish that more people could feel it. Like when my girlfriend has her period and she's cramping and she's in pain and I look at her and I just go, that's probably not that bad. I understand.